Okay, so here we have the caravan with the original steps removed, and you can see the mount on the left hand side and the mount on the right hand side. Now, one of the things that we are going to have to do before we install these new steps is you'll see that there's this conduit just in here that needs to be taken out of there, and it just masks the cable for this little light. So I've got a piece of flexible conduit, this stuff, that I'm just going to feed over the top of that cable and put it all back together again and get it ready. All right, so I've got a little bit of conduit installed, and we've just poked that back into the hole, and we'll adjust it to suit once we get the step in place, just to give it a bit of extra protection. So I've managed to set up my left and right brackets. And they're called left and right because you've got a right hand and a left hand, and that's sort of what we're doing. What I have here on the one that I prepared earlier is I've installed a mud flap on this one. The mud flap you can get from wherever you want, from whatever brand you like, and I've just fixed it on there with tack screws, or if you don't want a mud flap, then certainly don't worry about it. So to install this, you'll see that from the kit that it's got the bolts already installed and done up. And when you've had a look under there, you'll see that the holes are slotted. And now it's just a matter of getting this apparatus, installing it up under the caravan and sliding it onto the slotted holes, and it stays there. Pretty straightforward, I think. For the one on the left-hand side, we do the same thing, and you'll see that that's how it comes out of the packet. And we'll just lift it up under there, and we'll just slide onto the slotted holes, and it stays there. So that's the hardest part done. Not really. Our next step is to get the catch for the latch, which is this piece. Remember putting that together before, and using some of these 6mm bolts. So before we do any bolts up, let's put this in because it does make it so much easier. So we've got plenty of room, and we're just going to reach in the back here, put a bolt in, do the same thing on the other side. Wriggle it around a bit and you'll get the other bolt in. And I'll just get the other bolts, put the top two in. Having a couple of extra joints in your fingers sometimes is an advantage. And you'll see that it is certainly fiddly with that mud flap on there. Retrieve the drop one, and let's do the same thing on the other end. Nice. Now we'll just spin the nuts on. Get another one. Do the same thing there. On the other end. Find that one you dropped. Here it is. And away you go. So it's got that bit bolted up. From here, let's do some bolts up a little bit and just make it a little bit snug so that it doesn't flop around the place and fall on you. So we'll be back in just a second after we've done those bolts up. All right, we're going to fit the pivot bar. I've taken the pivot bar and I've put some Loctite on the threads on each end. And now we want to get two of these M12 zinc plated bolts and a washer for each. I'll take one of those, and I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the very end of it where the thing's going to ride, and pop it through the hole in this frame at the back, and then put the washer on the inside. I'll get the pivot bar, and I'll just start that bolt. I'll let it sit there and it can't fall off. I'll get the other M12 zinc bolt and put a bit of grease on the end of it. We'll stick that in the hole at the other end. Put the washer on the inside, and then let's lift this little guy up and screw that bolt in as well. And that's sitting there just nicely now. Just make sure that pivots, does what it's supposed to do. Now, the idea of this is you'll see that it's slack, is that those bolts only provide a pivot. They don't do up to hold this bar in place and make it tight. So I'm just going to put a little rattle gun on the end of this and do it up until the bolt bottoms out. And you'll see that the bolt doesn't do up. So we've done the bolts up on that pivot bar and they've bottomed out, but you'll see that it hasn't done up tight. And it's done that way on purpose. The same on the other end. And that's just so that it can float and find its own centre when we put the steps on. So don't stress about that. The bolts are done up tight. We've got Loctite in there. They'll be fine. And here we go now to install the steps. We've got them sitting on the floor in front of me. And you'll see that when I grab a hold of them, I've got those inner pivot bars. I'm just going to unfold the whole lot. If I just do one at a time, I can just pick that up and make it fit on that bolt on that side. Do the same thing on that side. And right, so the steps are now just hanging from those inner mounts. And as I pick them up, you'll see that they start to take some shape. I'm going to hold that up with the knee. And I'll get a hold of one of the M12 stainless bolts and 3 washers. There'll be 1 washer goes on the outside, 2 on the inside for packers, and I'll just wind that in and that'll hold that weight. And I'll repeat the same on the other side. So M12 stainless bolt with a washer on the outside, 2 on the inside for packers, and jiggle it around with your knees. And now it's just hanging there. The worst part of our installation is done. But let's make sure that we've got those inner ones pushed in. While we're doing that, we'll get another stainless washer and the nut, and we'll just guide that up onto the bolt on the inside, like so. I'll get the one on the other side and we'll repeat that. Now you remember when we were doing the setting up for this that we put some grease on the bolt and the washers, so make sure that's all nicely lubricated, and away we go. Now it definitely can't fall on you and it's all good to go. Alright, now we're going to put in the little pivot locks. So we're going to need for this a nut with a couple of washers and an M12 bolt, a nut and a washer. So 2 nuts and a washer for that as well. So I'm just going to reach in the back here. You'll see that I've got our pivot bar. I've got a washer on here already. So the washer's sitting there already. I've greased the bolt like we showed you in an earlier video. I'm just going to put that on with, again, some grease on there and a washer on the outside. And that'll live in there like so. And I'll just pop a nut on there to stop it falling off. And that'll just live there just nicely like that for me. I need a nut for that one. So now I'm just going to reach through here and get our pivot bar. And our challenge now is to get these to line up so I can get a bolt to go through that hole. What I want to do is to have our bolt, it's a zinc plate bolt with a washer on it. We'll go through the hole in the pivot bar. Like so. We'll have a washer on the outside and then pop the nut on. Just like so. Nice. Now we'll repeat the same on the other side. All right, so we've got both of those pivot locks installed now. All the bolts are loose. So all we've done is just put the nuts on by hand. They're all nylock nuts. But what you can see now is how this operates. So what I'm going to do is just pull this out now, and you can see how it now falls over the centre, and they're locked. So this gives us now an easy place now to start doing all the bolts up. So what we want to do is run all these nuts down so as that they are not quite firm, because we want to have slack and slip in every one of these joints. If we do them up too tight, then the stairs will be really stiff. And so each and every time we go about doing a set of these up, we should probably test it and see to make sure that we haven't got it binding up so that it doesn't do what we want it to do. I'm using just a little rattle gun, like a nut runner, to be able to do this with, and this lets us do most of it. And then with just an open end spanner, I can feel how snug they are. And you can feel, see, just a bit too much. And now if I just test that again, it's still nice and easy. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Happy with that. So I'll try and get a bit more room here. I'll just fold them right up. And that'll give me a bit more space. Too tight. Goldilocks effect is just right. There's a couple of these that you can't get a nut runner on, so your ratchet handle or your sockets to go for some of these.
You can certainly feel when they're starting to do it.
And we're getting pretty close. So it's doing what it's got to do. Let's test to see that we can put it away and see how this shapes up.
Beautiful.
There we go. Now, we've still got to do our mounting bolts up and finish up tightening up some other bolts. I'll do that and I'll be back in just a minute. After we've had such a fun time installing the steps and getting all of the hinges adjusted so that it's all nice and smooth, you need to make sure that we've got enough room for all of the linkages to pass the frame. Nothing drags and scrapes off all of the powder coat. So we've got clearance. The holes that the mounts are bolted to are slotted. So if you need to squeeze these out and make sure that you've got a bit of extra room, now's a good time to do that. I'm satisfied with where this is, so I'm going to get a 17mm socket, an extension handle, or you can use a big rattle gun if that's what you want to do. And there are 3 bolts either side, and we're going to do them up, I hope. Yeah, we're doing them up. It's an M10 bolt. It'll take a fair bit of weight. So I'll finish doing that and I'll be back in a second. When we were putting our mounts on, you might have noticed this little bolt at the back here that doesn't have a head on. It was just a piece of thread through a big nut with another nut on the outside. The intention for this is that it just provides us an extra bit of bracing for the mount. And to make this bit work is that we just need to go about putting a spanner on there, winding that home. And that's it, pretty much done. We've got another one on the other side. And what ought to happen is that it winds the thread through, and then when the thread bottoms out against the chassis, the nut does up. And that sees now that the hole is pretty sturdy. Let's go about testing and adjusting our latch, and there's your steps finished.